Not on yet. There we are. Now we're on.
Now we are. Do 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 do.
Do-do.
Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Welcome to the Scalawags, the most professionally produced podcast this side of the Atlantic.
Where our records don't even need to spin before the music turns
That's
on.
right.
Oh, that's
With
right.
technology.
Which direction is it?
I don't even know.
How are any of us supposed to know that? I don't know, Bill. Maybe you would know.
It's clockwise.
Clockwise,
It is clockwise they spin.
which also has this prerequisite that we know which direction an analog clock moves.
Yeah, that's true.
But
I
if
think
you
most
if you
people
do it
still know that.
if you do it counterclockwise, then this is the Scalawags podcast.
Yeah,
where we have demonic messages.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Worship the devil, and all
That's
that.
where all of your types turn into kinds.
Oh my gosh, weirdest duality ever.
And we're off to a great start. All right.
Yeah, what's everybody been up to this summer?
Well, yeah, it's been a while since we did the last one of these, hasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, I speaking personally, I've got a lot going on. I've just started with I've re-upped a contract that I've been on for a long time, but also started with a startup that does wine software called Wine for Me. If you've got an iPhone, you can download it now. It hasn't got an Android version yet, but that's kind of interesting. I'm working on the back end and wine classifications and things like that. It's pretty interesting stuff.
So I got all excited when you said wine because I was like, oh, you're working on the emulator, and then it just turns out it's fermented grapes.
It's the best kind of wine.
So in other news, Daniel and I are going to start working on Wine, the emulator, and we're going to call it Wine at Me, Bro.
Wine at me, bro.
This wasn't happening before 5 seconds ago. Now it is.
Yeah, it's guaranteed because you mentioned wine. Anyway.
It's a thing. So on top of that, there's the slip stuff, and there's been a lot going on. It is, if people wonder why the slip stuff doesn't get done in a timely fashion, that's kind of it. There's a real premium on time right now, but it's all good. It's all fun stuff. So everything's in Scala. I can say that. Still almost 100% Scala, except for the bit that I'm doing in Python now, which is the Sublime SBT, the Sublime Enzyme stuff, which we'll talk about a bit later, I guess. But anyway, that's me. That's what I've been up to.
You've also been up to trying to kill me by...
That's right, taking you out on a
bicycle in like 107-degree heat.
It was, well, that was when everyone was in town, but yeah, that was a warm weekend, as it turned out. About 25 miles between wineries. But nobody died. No one
25
actually
miles
died.
at sea level? That sounds actually pretty great.
It would have been much nicer had it not been 107 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's very warm to be on pavement.
It's not even possible to get that hot, I thought.
Well, there was a risk that one of us would just spontaneously burst into flames, but it didn't happen.
That's good. That's good.
Very fortuitous.
So what have you guys been up to? Enough about me.
Oh, so much work. Lots and lots and lots of work. I haven't even been able to do as much open source stuff as I had been doing in the past. Been contributing a little bit to Scala Z streams, now FS2, but it's been very difficult. But hopefully, with Scala World kind of passing out of the way and going into Q3, things will be more reasonable in that department.
Excellent. So Scala Z streams, just so I keep up with the latest news, that no longer depends completely on Scala Z, or does it still at the moment?
So this is we can do a quick digression here, or we can table this for later.
Okay.
But it's at present, yes, it still depends on Scala Z, and it is still Scala Z streams. We're going to have one more release based on current master, which is 0.8. That is literally just waiting for me. So I need to. Like, I feel.
What are you doing Scalawags for, man? Get on with it.
I'm going to do it like during Scala World or something. But there's a couple of pull requests, some really great contributions that. Hopefully you guys are listening to this because I'd like to thank you for your patience, and I really haven't forgotten about you. So a lot of great stuff is going to get in there, but that's going to be the last release in master, and the last release that depends on Scala Z. After that, we have the redesign branch, which Paul Chusano has been working on for like 3 months now, and that no longer depends on Scala Z at all. So we've taken task, we've taken actor, we've pulled them out of Scala Z, and we now have control of them. We no longer depend on Scala Z for type class instances or either or any of that stuff. We're probably going to have some compat projects, like a Scala Z compat and a CATS compat, for example. But the core will not be Scala Z specific. But the nice thing about this is, as part of this exercise, we've had to make some of this stuff more abstract. So like Scala Z stream right now in master is very dependent on task. Like everything concurrency is hard coded to use task, because I mean, I don't know if you've looked at the implementation of the concurrency stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I'm actually
very task dependent.
I'm very interested in the fact that task is now available outside of Scala Z stream. That's something I would actually grab and use.
Yeah.
Oh, Scala Z, I mean, sorry.
Scala Z, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's available outside of Scala Z. More interestingly, Scala Z stream, or rather FS2, is we've abstracted the concurrency stuff in the redesign. So it's actually possible to use FS2 with things that are task-like that are not actually task. So you could, for example, use the concurrency primitives in FS2 with a Scala future, and that would actually work.
Cool. Yes, a future with a function 0 to delay it, and maybe a cleanup and a recover, would be pretty close to what task gives you, right? So you could kind of abstract it there. Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, the biggest trick is like things when the fairness algorithms assume things. The fairness algorithms all assume that it has control over like when things run, which is true for task, because task doesn't run eagerly. Future runs eagerly, so some of the fairness stuff might have some really wonky properties, and you might retain more memory than you think you should. But the algorithm should at least be correct.
Very cool. That was a total tangent, and that was all on me. I apologize, guys.
That's
Somebody
fine.
else go.
Did you guys buy the rights to the name from IBM?
FS2? No.
Wait, I'm thinking of OS2. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's also PS2, which
I
is
was going to say
another
the PS2, yeah.
deprecated thing. That,
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't actually know if it's FS2 or FS squared, because it's short for functional streams for Scala. So FSFS.
Where's the other F?
4.
I don't. Yeah. Where's it?
It's parens, Josh. It's parens FS. Close parens too.
Yeah, or you can also just pretend that the 4 and doesn't get an F in the acronym, and in which case you can associate the exponent naturally. I don't know which is the correct pronunciation, but I've been pronouncing it FS2.
So the S's are combined using a monoid to be named later.
I don't know. I think it would actually be cool to like to make the logo like F bracket S bracket squared or something like that. I think that'd be kind of cool. But I haven't seen any designs in that. But that will be the name of Scala Z streams going forward with the redesign. It's not the name of the 0.8 release.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I can go next if you want.
Sure.
Okay. So this summer we had lots of like I want to call them honeydew projects, but that's not. It's just like fix up the house kind of things. So I've been doing that a lot, which I don't know if you've tried to like repair your house in any way, but it turns out I'm not a handyman. That's one thing I've learned.
You look like a handyman, so I'm sort of surprised, but.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I tried to hang up new lights, and I was like 0 for 5, and then I was 2 for 5, and then eventually I got all 5 for 5 actually working and lighting when you flick the switch. So that took a while, but yeah, I mean it's like debugging software, right? Trying to get a circuit to work. And I rewrote all of the macros in the pickling library in my spare time. You know,
between lights.
Between hanging up everything, yeah.
That's some serious home improvement there, working on pickling.
Yeah, so...
I also wrote a whole flip on replacement views library.
Yeah, you've been making us look bad, man.
Well, I did the replacement view library like a year ago, and then just sat on it until they're like, hey, we should redo slips. I'm like, hey, I should do this view thing I always wanted to do.
Excellent. You are one of the first 2 slips that we've had in the new process, which is very
I,
cool.
I even got a number.
Yeah, you did.
I got the digits.
I think you got
guys.
two. I think you've got two now, haven't you? Because you've got the one to deprecate the old views as well. Did we do that? Yep.
I thought deprecating the old views and the new one are the same slip, but maybe I need to change them.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fine. Yeah. Okay, cool. That leaves Seth.
So that's exciting.
What have you been up to, Seth?
Well, I went to San Francisco to go to Scala by the Bay.
Some crazy man made you go cycling in really, really hot temperatures. Yeah.
I went to the JVM Language Summit.
Oh.
I had my picture taken.
Always wanted to go there.
Yeah, it was fun. I had my picture taken next to the old Sun Microsystems sign. Someone saw me looking at it, like, and sort of came by and was like, "Oh, I used to work for Sun. Do you want me to take your picture with the sign?" I think they could tell that I was sort of
sad.
There was a tear rolling down my cheek.
Oh,
Yeah.
Poor Sun. Man, poor old Sun.
Yeah. I'm told that the Oracle campus there before it was Oracle, it was Sun, and before it was Sun, it was an insane asylum.
That's so it was the clock tower one. Yeah.
Yeah.
The clock tower. Yeah.
So the language summit was great. It was really interesting to put faces and voices and personalities to some of the main Java people. There were good talks by John Rose and other folks. It wasn't so much of a language summit as a JVM summit. So most of the talk was about upcoming changes to the VM rather than there weren't that many language people there. There were a few of us from Scala, Charles Nutter from JRuby, and Attila from the Nashorn project, but it was definitely JVM focused.
Yeah, was Rich Hickey there? Because I went for a couple of years when it first got going, and met Rich Hickey there a couple of times. He was very energetic and had amazing hair.
I don't think there were any Clojure people there, at least not that spoke up.
Okay. Huh. But yeah, well, very cool. So can you tell us anything about what's coming in the JVM that's of interest to Scala people?
Well, we're not getting tail calls, so you can forget about that.
I knew John Rose was interested in that. That's what I was hoping for.
So John Rose's talk was a very long list of all the wonderful things that he would love to see happen in the JVM, and tail calls was certainly on that list. But then someone raised their hand and was like, "Well, are we actually getting tail calls, or is this just on this long list?" And I think it's fair to summarize the response as don't get your hopes up. Like basically, customers aren't asking for this. Like everyone kind of wants it, but no one really
wants to pay for
it. No one who mattered really wants it enough to insist on it.
Right.
What about the whole multi-entry point functions for unboxed primitives thing? Because I know that John Rose was really interested in that for a while, maybe for Java 9. I don't remember what the name of that functionality was called.
I'm not exactly sure what you are referring to. Certainly, the most talk that there was about work that's actually happening, that's actually going forward, was about value types. Are you asking about that stuff?
Well, this was an alternative intermediary proposal to value types in some ways, where basically you could compile a function that took boxed primitives, where it doesn't necessarily have to be the Java boxed primitives. It could be whatever you want, like something that has some notion of unboxing. And you do that unboxing, the very first thing in your function in the bytecode, and then now you have the primitives on the stack, and you mark that point in the bytecode. And someone outside the function can call to the function entering at that point if they have the primitives on the stack already. So you have the function in its boxed sort of taking objects form, right? And so that the unboxing happens at the top. But if someone already has the unboxed primitives on the stack, they can just enter past the boxing point, and they don't have to do any unboxing dance thing.
I'm not sure if I remember hearing anything answering to that.
Okay, it may have simply fallen off the table. I know John was pretty keen on that idea like a year and a half ago.
So for the value type thing, is it going to be the IBM proposal that goes through, or what?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the history on this stuff.
Okay, I'm really curious about that because A, it could have dramatic performance implications for everybody, which would be awesome, and B, some of the proposals that were there were like obviously less than what you would want, but would actually work. So the IBM proposal was like for objects, you can denote an object as being able to ignore identity, or like its identity can be stored somewhere else outside of the object instead of inside of it, so that you could actually have arrays sized to the size of an object, but it still looked like an object. I forget all the details, but it practically what you end up with is something that looks really disgusting, but happens to be efficient and act like an anyval, and is easy to implement on the VM to the point where you can do it. Yep. And it doesn't break everything that exists out there today, which was kind of exciting because it actually made value classes like hit everybody's radar. But I'm curious if they're still adopting that aspect of it, or if they're trying to go more aggressive.
It's hard for me to answer because I didn't see that other proposal. I should, yeah. I can just sum it up by saying that like this is what has reached the front of the queue, is that, and you know, rightly so. Like as much as I want tail calls, I would have to say this probably is a bigger deal for the VM. The fact that everything has to be boxed all the time. You know, even 20 years into the lifetime of this VM, like it is the biggest performance thing, certainly holding the JVM back versus versus native code. So
yeah, TCO is something that like we could work around the fact that we don't have it, right? It's a bit of a pain. It's something that you have to kind of keep in mind that you don't have to normally keep in mind when you're sort of reasoning about your code. But like, it's not a completely insurmountable problem. Everything being boxed everywhere, the fact that we can't have tag pointers, that sort of thing, like all of that is really problematic for Scala. And for basically every other language ever. Like, it's everyone on the JVM is impacted by this, and impacted in ways that can't be easily worked around.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I agree it's a higher priority.
I try catch Stack Overflow exception all the time in all of my functions.
Yeah, I mean, that's the right way to do TCO. I mean,
just
and then you put a comment on it that says trampoline, and you're done.
Trampoline.
No, all it does is say to do trampoline null.
So here's actually like we joke about this, right? But the funny thing is that there was a Scheme interpreter years ago, I think back in the late 80s, that actually experimented with this concept, right? Because Scheme does trampolining, right? And it has a trampoline functionality built into it. But they wanted to see what would happen if, rather than just trampolining back and forth all the time, if they just let it overflow, but carried the last stack frame in the Stack Overflow error, caught it, and then reset, right? So basically, rather than trampolining with every call, you trampoline with every few thousand calls. And they called it, they avoid lots of little bounces by occasionally jumping off the Empire State Building.
I think they actually implemented. Yeah, they actually implemented this in the Scala Future library, if I recall correctly. There's like a batch executor that
Really?
will try to run your calls on the same thread, but
Oh
if it
yeah, yeah,
catches the Stack Overflow, right, then it says, "Oh, oops," and then it throws it to the queue to like run later,
yeah,
which is kind of fun. Kind of fun.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's a really good concept, and especially for things like thread allocation, it actually makes a ton more sense. And the wonderful thing is that the scheme guys found that because of how fast native like non-trampoline calls are, direct calls on the stack, um, as long as you're getting a few thousand calls with each growth of the Empire State Building, you're actually getting comparable performance to a standard trampoline.
Mm.
So like it's actually a really really good technique. People just never use it.
Except for Scala.
Except for Scala, that's right. Because
Well,
we catch
yeah,
SOE.
we do in all of our code. That's what
Yes.
I do. No, it is a pretty cool technique. I actually don't know if Future still do that. I remember they did that at one point in time. At least one of the I remember seeing code that did that at one point in time. Anyway, another question I have about the language summit. Can I ask another question, or do we need to move on?
No, go ahead. Although I'm not doing so well on filling you all in on technical details.
That's fine. How big were modules?
Oh,
My-
about three to 5K, I think.
Another
Maybe?
another good question, how small was the class path?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, the module change, as a contributor to SBT has me terrified.
So there was a presentation by Mark Reinhold on the latest iteration of the module stuff, and there's a new write-up. I'll put the by Reinhold. I'll put the link in the show notes that summarizes what he said. What is it about what is it about about this that terrifies you?
Well, so basically there are certain tricks that tool authors rely on, and these are things like
That's putting it very, very kindly.
yeah. So basically, there's code that
Outrageous hacks.
has been passed, if you will, from Ant to Maven to SBT, or re-implemented, I think is the right term, from scratch. Where, like, if you look at the two implementations, they're basically using the same technique, even if the code looks completely different. And the techniques are things like, oh, let's check our class path and see if Java C is available. If so, we'll call Java C directly. If not, we're probably on a newer JDK. Let's see if the API is available that's supposed to be there. Oh, it's not. Okay, now let's fork out to the system and call Java C that way.
Yeah.
This
And that's
logic
basically the
is-
mildest of them. There's a lot of random stuff that goes in there.
There's a lot of stuff that's dirtier. My favorite one is actually something we had to do for Activator and Windows, where the actual argument parsing in the JDK is broken, where the way it parses quotes doesn't handle escapes correctly. So we actually have to take our strings, we have to escape the quotes, and then we have to escape them again for the JDK and pass them in. So when the JDK does its escaping, it creates the correct strings as opposed to the wrong strings, which is what it normally does. These are things where, like, you have to know what version of JDK you're on. You have to know all of the things available in the class path and sort of like inject your fixes. Where from a build tool, you just assume you can see everything. When they go to modules and you can't see everything, I'm a little scared about all these hacks. Like the whole incremental compiler right now, we made a fix about a year ago to use the JDK standard implementation of call a compiler in the hopes that they will still support it when modules hit, because the thing we were using was no longer supported as of like JDK 8. So those kind of changes are really painful.
I'm guessing that what you're going to have to do, Josh, in SBT is it's basically just going to have to load every module it can possibly load.
Give me all of your base.
No, I mean that's actually a very good way of putting it. Like all the module belong to me and put them in memory now. Like that's basically what SBT is going to have to do for its own runtime, I think. And you're not going to get any modularity out of that at all. So basically, what is now currently the SBT bootstrap and like loading itself and getting everything and building that insane class path or class loader hierarchy, what that will also have to do is basically defeat the module system by pulling everything in.
Yeah, especially Corbus, since that's what we based SBT server on.
Well, I think
wait.
in the end, the module system isn't going to be a problem for you because you're just going to get around it with another outrageous hack.
Yeah, but then people can't test module code, right? In SBT, like it's just a never-ending problem then, like that.
Well, but it's a problem that would be confined to SBT.
Mm.
So SBT itself, SBT's own runtime, and any plugins, like any build plugins and things like that, would be not modular. But people would be able to use SBT on modular code bases without a problem.
I'd rather just make everything modular.
Ideally.
Let's break everything, the whole world.
MBT.
But we'll not give them any good
gosh.
reason to change. And then we'll complain when they don't change. And then when everyone hates OSGI, we'll do it again. This is a good plan, right, guys?
Oh my gosh!
You should look at the modules thing from Mark Reinhold and look for the key phrase container or container-like applications. They make a distinction between ordinary applications and container-like applications, and the container-like stuff is where support for having multiple versions of the same module in the same JVM and stuff.
So that kind of stuff makes me actually really excited because SBT is a container. Like, we contain your application inside of us, and then we run it, and then we kill it, and then we run it, and then we kill it, then we run it, then we kill it.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons it can be fast. What?
It never goes wrong.
Yeah, that's never a problem. No, that is a problem. But one of the most exciting JDK proposals that got killed a long time ago was isolates for SBT. Modules comes close to being isolates. I don't know if it's really going to be isolates, but I'm actually really excited for the module change, and I'm terrified at how much code in SBT will have to be fixed. Like, it could just be one of those never-ending, we'll support it in 2 years kind of a thing.
Speaking of SBT, I've started working on the SBT build for Scala itself. This is something that
this is the white whale of the Scala project. I'm sorry, like I don't mean to disparage anyone's effort in this. I know it's a very hard problem, but this has been attempted on and off like for the last 5 years.
So the problem in the past was actually the incremental compiler couldn't work with the Scala build. That was actually the case for a long time. We just recently made a change where the Scala team can actually provide its own source for the incremental compiler, so they can actually change their own code and still be able to compile their project. In the past, what would happen with the SBT build was you'd make the build, and it would work great, and then someone would make a change that breaks the incremental compiler, and then the whole build was broken, and everyone would be like, this build sucks, you can't use it. Well, actually, you broke it, like you broke the interface. So that's no longer a problem, so it's actually possible to get things working. And if I recall correctly, Seth, are you using the incremental compiler, like, don't work like a real incremental compiler hooks that they added for Scala specifically?
I don't know. I haven't looked at that part.
There's like a work exactly like ant flag that you can set that we don't want to support.
Everybody wants that flag.
We don't really want to support it because it's broken.
I want more ant in my life.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is, with that flag on, you have to write everything in XML.
Yes.
Explicitly, in great detail.
Yeah. You actually do like bracket val x equals.
You can turn a 10-line SBT file into a 2,000-line XML file.
Yep.
That's excellent. That's what we need.
This is a kind of great white whale. I can remember discussions about it. I can remember work on it stretching back at least as far as the first Scalathon, which was like, what, 2010 or something. But
I started on it
Before
5 years ago, man. That was
Yeah.
that was when I started on it.
when
And
there was a GitHub issue where I mentioned last week that I was working on this, and Paul Phillips posted a screenshot of Duke Nukem Forever. But there are some reasons why this latest round might actually be able to be completed. One is that the way that we're handling bootstrapping is now a lot simpler. I don't know if people remember, but there was a kind of epic thread on Scala internals a year or two ago about whether it was actually necessary to support changes to the compiler that could only be compiled by bootstrapping, or whether it was fine to just require that each new version be buildable by the previous version.
Yeah.
And so that was settled in favor of saying every new version has to be compilable by the previous version, and that really simplifies the SPT situation, because I think a lot of the difficulty that people were having before had to do with figuring out how to bootstrap, and so the policy change there will help, and then also just the fact that we're not trying to do the bootstrapping step all within a single run of SPT. So if we need to if we need to build a new compiler and then build something with that compiler, we just drop out of SPT. There'll be like a shell script or something outside of that coordinates it.
yeah,
So
so 5 years
the
ago,
hardest stuff we're just skipping. So if you look at the remaining to-do list now, most of it just has to do with all of the infrastructure around the old build, everything having to do with testing and releases that's just assuming that it's based on Ant. All of that stuff has to be updated, and it's just a pain.
Well, you just write an Ant build that delegates to SPT
no.
with the run like Ant flag.
Yeah, with the only accept XML SPT flag. So I remember 5 years ago when you used to have to load the compiler 3 times in memory to get the incremental compilation to work in SPT, and even then it wasn't really incremental because it would always keep invalidating itself because the compiler would change itself through the stages. But the amount of memory you needed to run 3 active compilers against the same code base at the same time was astronomical. It was like 2 gigabytes, I believe.
No, it was more than 2 gig. Like, it was 2 gig just to get the basic footprint, and then if you wanted to compile anything with it, you were talking 3.5 to 4 gig minimum.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it's like, number one, you're never going to do this on a 32-bit JDK, and number two, your GC pauses are going to be like in the minutes. So good luck.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, we didn't even have SSDs back then, so all of this stuff was going out to
we did. Yeah, we did, man. We had an SSD. I even practiced when we were initially doing it. I would throw the compiler source code into a RAMFS or a RAM disk, and then
just so you could iterate faster.
Yeah, but it actually turns out that RAM disk, just because the caching implementation for RAM disk turned out to be slower than the SSD. That was exciting. But that was 5 years ago. I don't know what it is now. But we did all sorts of crazy things to try to make it sane, and it didn't work. The only thing that I did manage to do, though, was I ran tilde scripted and a particular scripted test, and I fixed a bug. And then after I fixed my bug, someone committed something that broke the incremental compiler interface, and I couldn't prove that it worked anymore. So then I had to stop using my own SPT build. It was good times, guys.
Yeah. This is what I mean by it being the white whale.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting though to be able to do like tilde scripted. I mean that is a game changer for actually being able to test bugs and things.
Yeah, I mean there's iterating on the Scala compiler is not easy, and I mean I think a lot of the process changes have tried to make contributing to Scala, like core Scala, easier and more approachable for people. But at the end of the day, like, we're actually approaching a generation of developers who don't even know how to use Ant. like I don't mean to go all kids these days, but like I work with an incredibly brilliant developer who has no idea how to use Ant, who has never touched Ant, who has never had a reason to touch Ant.
I
Like,
haven't used it. I haven't written anything in Ant for a good 6 to 8 years now, so I'd be pretty rusty at the very least.
exactly. So now rewind to when you personally first started working on Java projects or something like that, and imagine that someone had handed you a Java project that built with autoconf. Like that's the equivalent of the equivalent to handing people Scala C's code base. It's just
But
arcane.
that did happen to me.
It happened to me too, and I don't want to remember it. But like that is the equivalent of Scala C building with Ant.
So I just want to mention one more thing about the SVT build, which is that if anyone wants to play with it, it is in the main repo. This work isn't happening on a branch. It's happening on 211x.
Because YOLO.
It's kept separate from the Ant stuff just by having a different build directory. And it actually already does most of the things that you would want. You can run JUnit tests, you can run par test, you can make changes to the compiler, you can make changes to the standard library. The stuff that's still broken is really just around the edges on stuff like JLine. Although you can run the REPL, Jason Zaw got that working. So it would be awesome if anyone else who fancies themselves a Scala or SBT hacker would start using the build and let us know if there are issues that are preventing you from using it in order to do your Scala open source contributor work.
Are you looking at Josh in particular, Seth?
I'm looking at all of you.
This strikes me as one of those things that we're all going to try to like pitch in and help to make better, and we're going to try to do this and do that. And there's always going to be like these niggling, annoying things and like these stuff that's not going to work and whatnot. And then Eugene Yokota is going to come in and just like it's going to be fantastic all of a sudden because he finally got around to it.
Yeah, but it'll have some weird name. Like,
yeah, we're not going to be able to pronounce it, but it will be perking. It will be working and it will be perfect.
No, I remember we were talking about making how Scala pickling, like we wanted to use that for serialization, but we need the ability to hash things, and pickling can pull out structures, so we need to hash things. I'd be like, oh yeah, hash browns. I'm like, what? And then he would just like start talking about hash browns. I'm like, dude, we're not even talking about breakfast. He's like, no, the hashing library. Oh, okay, because he always comes up with really clever names. So the other day I was explaining SBT Doggy to someone, and they're like, why is it called SBT Doggy?
Because Eugene?
Or Dirty Money was another plugin. If you're familiar with that one.
Oh my gosh.
That cleans your cache.
These are all your plugins, okay?
No, those are Eugene's plugins, yeah. Mine have boring names like PGP or Byte.
So in other words, yours have names that are Googleable that people can find right away. Eugene's has names that are very memorable once you find them, but you have to like machete your way through the jungle to find them.
Yeah, and they're the most useful ones to actually have on your class. Yeah. Yeah.
So Josh, I think you have to cut out a little early, so I want to ask you about one of the agenda topics, which was like yours, which is there's now support for Scala in one of the, you called it enterprise hipster build tools.
Yeah, so enterprise hipster build tools. I don't know if you guys have been following this. There are 3 of them right now that I'm aware of. There is Pants, right, from Foursquare and Twitter, which we've been working with those guys from SBT. They've been awesome on the incremental compiler. Like, I think you're going to end up with some really good stuff coming from them and helping out all builds. So that's really cool. But related, Facebook Buck is the other one that I think has the best incremental compilation support of the bunch, and it's specifically geared for Android. It's something where I would like to steal all of their incremental compilation code and throw it into an Android plugin, if I could, because they have an incremental DEX assembler, which is kind of cool. But they don't have Scala support yet, which is very sad. But Google has something called Bazel, which has experimental Scala support in their beta. So the hipster build tools are basically looks like Scala is becoming one of the things in them. Pants was actually designed for Scala, but it doesn't have that incremental Dex stuff from Facebook Buck, which makes me a little sad. I want that incremental Dex Android stuff. I want to try. I want Scala on Android to be good.
The first version of Pants was not actually a Scala tool, was it? I thought it was. Foursquare just adapted it for Scala.
It could be that Foursquare adapted it for Scala. Yeah, it's written in Python. I just know they've had Scala support for a long time, I guess.
Right.
I've had one of my rare flashes of marketing inspirational genius, and my suggestion is that we combine Buck and Pants and call it Buckskin Pants.
I like it. I like it.
Anyway, okay, that killed things. Oh, come on, guys, Buckskin Pants. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I guess the only thing I want to say about that, all three of these tools are basically based on the notion of file-to-file dependencies with rules that generate files like old school make. And then they all kind of pretend like you can distribute this into some sort of a cluster, but don't expose the actual cluster distribution mechanism to the public. Yeah.
So there's some hooks where you fill that in.
I guess. Having not used any of the three, just paying attention to them because that's what I do. I don't actually know. I know the syntax to use them. I know their high-level design. I don't actually know how to make a cluster out of them. But I do know that all of them are like, yeah, this isn't part of the open source. Cool, guys.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. So if you want to use Scala with something weird and nascent, feel free. That said, there's also been a lot of work on the Android SPT stuff. I actually saw, what is it, Peter Nguyen? Is that his name? PFN? I don't even know how you pronounce it. He actually added something that reads your Gradle build file and auto-generates at runtime an SPT build file for you. So you can use SPT to build your Gradle Android project.
Cool.
I think
cool. I mean, what are the advantages to using SPT as like a proxy from Gradle like that?
I don't actually know. I do know that. So Gradle seems to be the build tool that won for getting direct Android support. Like I said, Facebook Buck implemented their own incremental Dex thing, which I think is awesome and is really cool technology and needs to be pulled in other places. I think we'd actually have to talk to PFN about it. I just thought it was an interesting thing he was doing where you can use. So SPT has the console quick, tilde test, all that kind of stuff, which isn't necessarily supported in Gradle yet. So this is a way that you can have, as part of a larger Gradle build or like the automated Android generate a project thing, you can still use SPT to do all of your interactive development stuff.
I'm going to jump in just quick here and do my public service bit. So explain what Dex is, because there may be people listening who don't know if they haven't used Android before. So when you develop for Android, you use a JVM-type language which compiles the class files, Java bytecode, and then Android needs a even more optimal kind of stripped-down version called Dex. So it compiles class files and turns them into Dex files. So what you're saying is, when the incremental compilation happens that incrementally compiles the class files, then this Dex thing also kicks in and only incrementally redexes these changed class files, which is pretty cool, as opposed to having to go through the whole lot and do the conversion all over again each time.
Exactly. That's why I started paying attention to these hipster build tools, because these kind of things are, right now each one has a niche, right? Each one is geared to a specific thing, and they all have good technologies. So.
Yeah, that's actually pretty nice. Because the thing that killed Android development on Scala for me was basically the turnaround time of making a change and waiting for it to go through all of the stages of recompiling that and getting it onto the device so that I could debug it. And
Right,
in the end, I was like, this just takes too long.
So there's a few problems facing it. Right now, the guys working on it are doing great work. I don't want to diminish anything they're doing. They're just up against huge semantic gaps, basically, where, like, one is, I think, ProGuard, right? You almost always have to ProGuard a Scala Android thing.
Because otherwise it ends up being 27 megabytes for, like, a
Right.
Hello World or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
And for those who don't know, ProGuard is essentially an optimizer that removes unused code. And ProGuard, you kind of want to be able to run that incrementally, but it's not designed for that in any way, and it's really slow. So
yeah, I feel like so ProGuard does a ton of things that the Android use case doesn't actually need. Like, it does a ton of things that the Android use case doesn't need. And ProGuard is an excellent tool. I really don't want to, like, harp on it in any way. It does what it does very well. But it was never really designed to be doing specifically the Android thing. Specifically, the Android thing, though, is not actually a hard problem. Like, I mean, of all of the things that you can do in a build tool that are sort of more complicated than just compilation, I mean delegating to a compiler, removing sort of orphan members of the compilation graph is actually very straightforward, done as a post-processing step.
And I think you can assume no reflection, but I don't remember.
Yes. You can with Android. You can assume no reflection. So that again takes care of a lot of the stuff that ProGuard is trying to do that it doesn't actually have to do.
Now the interesting thing here is if Tasty ever becomes a thing, they actually have, like, inlining and optimization across jars. That if we can get those things in some kind of an incrementally, notion, or some sort of, like, you basically have a Tasty thing which takes jar and goes to Dex and can do it incrementally, and do inlining and all that. That would be pretty awesome. That would be really awesome.
It would be. But in lieu of that, like, if someone wants a weekend project, where by weekend I mean probably a couple of months, you can do, like, replacing this part of ProGuard, right? The part that people care about for Android, is not a technically crazy thing, and doing it incrementally is very, very, very possible and straightforward. It's just a matter of doing the work, at which point suddenly Android on Scala gets very quick turnaround because yes.
We have an existence proof that this kind of thing is possible, which is the work that the Scala.js people did.
Yep.
It's a very similar problem, and even without having Tasty in place, they came up with their own intermediate representation and did it.
So related, I think JS is more important to target than Android at this point, and I think the stuff they've done is amazing. And I have to go. I got to go get the kids.
Oh man!
Sorry, guys.
I don't want to continue with it, Joshy. I was just going to share my second moment of marketing genius today, which is, instead of ProGuard, you could call it RoboGuard. So I'm just knocking them out of the park one after another today. Just come to me if you want your project name today. It's a free service. I will come up with a name for your project.
You should come up with an alternative name for my view proposal.
So I'm going to suggest something fairly radical here, just to float it for you guys, which is that I really would like to have Josh in the conversations that we had planned. We haven't actually got onto our real agenda yet. We've just talked about everything else so far. So what about we meet up in a couple of weeks and just use this agenda exactly as it is now to talk about?
Sure, and maybe then we'd also have Dr. Miller with us.
This is true.
Oh, and we can.
This week she's like too busy doctoring her doctor things. You know how Dr. Miller is.
There's a lot of people waiting for checkups in her office, and
so we should actually, instead of saying in like 2 weeks, we should try for next week even, or the week.
That works. I will be in Malta.
Next week I will be in England, so
we should
maybe.
Oh, you guys were thinking about doing it at Scala World, right?
If you want to do it at Scala World, how many of us are actually there? Is Seth there?
No, I wish.
Okay, so Heather and I are there, and I think that's it.
and I'll be in the same. Well, I'll be in a 1 hour time zone ahead of you in Malta. So that's the evening for me. I'll be drinking fine wines and eating dainty cheeses while I talk to you guys. But yeah, I'm up for that.
Scalawags so much more entertaining when we have emulators.
So we'll take our planning off air, and we'll see what we can do for you guys and let you know.
We are the Scalawags, working hard for you.
I do have to drop out now because otherwise I will scare my children by not being there. So I'll see you guys.
All right, take care, Josh.
See you, Josh.
Thanks for listening.
All right, yeah, I think that's probably it then for now. We'll get to the